Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio. I've got Josh Matlow, the councillor for Toronto St. Paul's, with us today to talk a little bit about him, his history, politics, and some of the issues in the city of Toronto today. Councillor Matlow, welcome to the show.
Good to be with you, Brian.
It's great to have you. I've tried to get you on my show for a while. I've had some other councillors on city council, but I've never had the privilege of having you.
I'm really happy to be here.
Tell us a little bit about yourself, if you could, off the top. Why'd you get into politics?
I've always been active on issues that I care about, whether it be, the environment, whether it be about, the community that I live in, whether it be about, social justice, whatever the issue that I cared about has been. I've never, even since I was a kid, I was never the type who would just want somebody to do something about it. I always wanted to get involved and have a seat at the table and see if I could affect change. And I've done that in many ways throughout my life. And there just came a point in my 20s and 30s when it just became obvious that rather than just begging politicians to do what I believed was the right thing, that I should actually go and do that and try to be the model of behavior and the model of politics that I believe in, and I've been doing it ever since. So, if you were to speak with my parents, they would say that I've been doing this since I was 4 years old.
Since you were 4 years old. So what do you think are the big issues that are burning in the city of Toronto today?
There are many big issues. Certainly affordability is the number one issue, whether it be housing, whether it be just day-to-day cost of living. People are struggling, and we're seeing that reflected in lots of ways these days. And I don't think any government is doing their job if they're not reflecting that priority squarely.
Mark Carney, our new prime minister, had a press conference last week, and he said he's going to double the number of homes being built every year. Is that possible?
Anything's possible if we actually do it. What we've been hearing over the years is a lot of commitments, a lot of promises. And then if they don't coincide with whether it be an election or ribbon cutting, different levels of government happening to get along with each other at that moment, they just don't happen. Sometimes parts of those promises are actually realized, but there's a lot more that we need to do at every level of government to make sure that we have the kind of supply of homes that we need to combat the housing affordability crisis, and ultimately recognize that all the things that we've always had aren't working right now. So we're going to have to adjust to the fact that for example, like condo development in Toronto is at a 30-year low. There were nearly 2,000 units just sort of stuck or actually canceled in the last year or two. We have to deal with that reality rather than just sort of make promises that we're going to build them.
So what are we going to do about the housing crisis? It is this challenge where we've got, as you mentioned, condos that we've got one of the biggest supplies of condos in the last couple of years that have then seemed to have stalled. We've got this huge inventory of condos that are unsold, are unrented because the pricing is just too high. And yet at the same time, we've got this lack of housing. So how do I square these two issues that you've got?
There has been more attention at the City of Toronto on rental housing, and rental housing, has been more, let's say, possible for the industry due to a number of different decisions made by the federal government, including the city government, over the past few years. And there have been a freeze on DCs, for example, at the city level as well. But we can't forget about the condo market. And the reason I say that is that we want to bring down the price of rent. But we also can't forget that there are a lot of people whose dream still is to one day own a home, and that's just not possible for most people these days. So we need to, I think, look at not DCs, for example, development charges, as this sort of static number anymore, but look at it as a lever. In other words, when the market's healthy, you can raise the number. When the market's not, I think we need to lower or remove the number. And also not look at even every area of our city as the same. So where there are underachieving areas, like for example, Scarborough Town Centre, I think we need to freeze DCs altogether for a while. Areas like Yonge and Eglinton, maybe not the same treatment. But we shouldn't be looking at what we've always done as sort of the way it always has to be. We should be more agile with how we have these charges, and in some cases, remove them altogether. We also need to be moving forward with looking at our neighborhoods as not just, again, the way they've always been over the last 100, 200 years, but looking more and more for different options for housing, different numbers of plexes. And I would also make an argument that sometimes we have this sort of yimby nimby debate in our neighborhoods over do you allow for more people into the buildings in our neighborhoods, or do you never support any change? I think if we can agree on certain design principles, not use character as a euphemism for keeping people out, but actually look at how do we design our neighborhoods with, great quality design, along with having sufficient infrastructure, social services, parks, school capacity, et cetera, that everybody needs, then we can get over exactly how many people live in every building.
So we've got an issue. Obviously, housing is unattainable by the vast majority of young people today, unless they've got rich parents that are going to subsidize, if not completely pay for the cost of housing. And I just interviewed a gentleman a couple of minutes ago who told me that his kids in their 20s and 30s are moving to Alberta because there's just not a chance for them to ever dream of owning a house in Toronto. At least that's what they said. But that's what the numbers bear out, that there's outmigration from Toronto and Ontario for the first time in history, as people are looking for economic opportunities that just don't exist. People have had different answers to this. One answer is that we've got to lower development charges. You've mentioned that. Our Prime Minister talked about having the size of them, that Mississauga and Vaughan have brought them down fairly significantly. I think the quote is that Toronto has increased development charges over the course of the last 10 years by 1,000%. Are development charges just crazy in today's environment? Bill talks about how taxes, which is primarily development charges, but also the GST, HST, are 31% of the cost of a new home or a new condo. Is development charges one of the biggest problems?
I think that's one of the reasons that I said, we can't do things the way we've always done it. We always historically in Toronto, and I think most cities in Canada, we've looked at development charges as a way to have growth pay for growth. That's always been the mantra: have growth pay for growth. But the question was never asked, but what if the growth can't happen? What if the market isn't actually getting shovels in the ground? What do you do then? Now, the other question that we need to ask ourselves is, how do we ensure that cities have the funds they need to provide a great quality of life for the residents? We still need to pave the roads. We still need the infrastructure built. We still need the parks. We need all that. So how do we do that? And I think we need to, frankly, reimagine that. I'd like to see cities have more powers, like through a city charter, for example, to be able to, raise the revenue they need, perform the duties that they have responsibilities for, and not entirely rely on any industry, whether it be the development industry for DCs, whether it be homeowners for land transfer tax, so heavily the way that we've always done it. I think that we need diversity. We need a toolbox of revenue tools to be able to do that, but it shouldn't be reliant on industries and on individuals that it's not a good system. But the other thing is, we don't have revenue tools that grow with the economy at the city level in Canada. And we also, when we're so heavily reliant on the market, whether it be DCs or land transfer tax, it's unpredictable. So we can't long-term budget on revenue tools that we don't really know are going to be there for us, given times like this, when the price of labor, the price of materials, everything's gotten so difficult for the industry that frankly, those shovels aren't getting in the ground. So we're not actually getting the money that we were hoping for.
One of your compatriots on city council made the quote, I'm paraphrasing, but a big percentage of nothing is still nothing. You got to lower the percentage. We're going to take a break for some messages and come back. And I want to ask our councillor, Josh Matlow, about red tape, about regulations, because that's another area that's been criticized. And then also just about the growth in spending. And is that a challenge? Stay with us, everyone. We're going to be back in 2 minutes with Josh Matlow, city councillor in Toronto. He ran for mayor. He's been very involved in politics at other levels of government, and he's going to be someone that we're hearing from in the city of Toronto for a long time. And so, someone that we want to get to know and understand what makes him tick and what his policies are. Stay with us, everyone. Back in 2 minutes.
Oh, a nice sip of coffee.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio. Real honor tonight to be chatting with City Councillor Josh Matlow. Josh, you ran for mayor. So you've been a city council for a while, a couple of terms. You've been very involved in politics at different levels of government. Why run for mayor?
I had no idea that I was about to run for mayor when I did. Nobody had any clue that John Tory would have to resign or decide to resign the way that he did. So it came to a surprise to all of us. But I've been advocating for a lot of things that I care about. I believe our city cares about, getting real about housing, getting real about improving our basic services, our quality of life, everything from our parks to our infrastructure, and I'd been advocating for these things for years. I was frustrated, frankly, with both the Tory and the Ford administrations. I didn't believe that their words always matched the reality, and I wanted to see Toronto do better. So, I recognize that I can't just talk about the things I care about without stepping up when that moment, it arrives. So, I ran. I got squeezed out of the election, as I'm sure you saw, between Anna, who had the Tory machine behind her, and Olivia, who had a 30-year name recognition behind her. So, it just wasn't my turn. That being said, though, I still fight for the platform that I put forward. I still fight for the issues that I care about, and I feel really fortunate that I get to do that.
I was impressed that Olivia Chow, I understand, came and headlined a fundraiser for you to help pay off your debt. Is that what happened?
That was incredibly thoughtful and caring of her. Given the situation in the mayoral race, I learned after the fact that my campaign had some debt, and I had to get out of my comfort level and start, asking people for some support in a way that is harder to do after you lose an election. People are a little less likely to donate to you after you're no longer a candidate. So there was some remaining debt that needed to be cleared, and Olivia very graciously sort of co-hosted an event with me, and it was a beautiful event. It actually turned into, I looked at this kind of packed dim sum restaurant. Every table had a reflection of different, whether it be geographical communities, cultural communities that I made friendships with over the course of the election and before. Friends of Olivia's were there too, and it was great. We had Chinese food and fun speeches, and a really good experience. And hallelujah, I was free of debt.
Congratulations for that, and thank you,
you,
Olivia Chow, for supporting you.
Yeah.
In that regard. She's been criticized. Council's been criticized that operating expenses, budgets have been increasing, and coming back to new Prime Minister Carney, who said that the federal government had gone up by 9% in operating expenses, and that was unsustainable, and he's going to bring it down to 2%. Be interesting to see if he actually can achieve that. City of Toronto has been going up at around 9% per year in the budget for the last couple of years. Is that sustainable?
Budgets going up constantly every single year are not sustainable, and certainly difficult decisions have to be made every year. Now, there was a KPMG look into our budget a few years ago. There have been over and over again audits done on the city's budget, and a lot has been cleared up. So, I'm confident that work will continue and still needs to continue. We're always going to need to go at least at the rate of inflation or above, just to be able to continue to pay for the things that Torontonians are expecting. Like, for example, we need to do better on snow clearing. There are things that we need to invest in to make sure that they're working. But there are many budgets that I still think we can go through and tighten up. My view is always, like, I know we have this debate about, do you spend or do you cut? And the reality is, like most household budgets, we should be cutting where there's redundancy or things that aren't working, or things that we shouldn't be doing at all. And then we should be investing and better resourcing areas, divisions that we know are necessary for a city to be well and to succeed. But there are a few budgets I can think of where we can tighten up the ship.
Stats Canada and CMHC did a big study a year ago of how long it took building permits to get approved and zoning changes to get approved. And
Yeah.
Toronto, Vancouver, and Victoria were listed as the worst in Canada, and Canada is one of the worst in the G7. And that it takes 2 to 3 times as long to get a development approved by cities as it does to actually build it. Is that sustainable? Does that make sense? Is this good
No.
regulation or bad
No,
regulation?
it's bad, and it never made sense. And that, I'm happy to say, like, a lot that work is happening at long last, to make the city's process more, uh, not only more speedy, but frankly more contextual. Meaning, not every checkbox needs to be there. There's a legacy of all these hoops and hurdles that people need to go through to get anything approved, anything delivered, anything moving, and they don't always make sense. So some of the work that I'm doing as a member of the planning committee is just trying to clean things up, like where you don't need to do something, don't do it. Where it shouldn't take that much time. Where, for example, if you get a no from somebody at the planning division, it shouldn't just be a no. It should be not that, but this. Let's get that going. This is how much time it's going to take. This is where you're at with the application process. Let's move things rather than allow things to stall for months and months and months. That's been part of Toronto's problem for years. And we do have some new staff and I think a new focus at the City of Toronto to expedite the application process. I'm hearing feedback from the industry that they're seeing some real improvement.
Some people think that city councilors can never approve a development because the community, their constituents, are going to vote against them if they approve a development. And so therefore, you just got to go to the Ontario Land Tribunal, and
Yeah,
you'll get
I disagree.
overruled by that. And frankly, I've heard this from some city planning people that say, it's going to be very difficult for you to get a positive planning report or for sure council support, but you'll get it approved at the OLT. And if you take a look at the record of the Ontario Land Tribunal, they actually approve something over 90% of all the development proposals that are sent into them. Maybe less than the developer had asked originally from city planning and city council. But do we have a problem here?
So first of all, like, going to the tribunal isn't good for anyone. Not only is it's not democratic at all, but it also, it's an appointed tribunal by the province. But for the city, for the communities, you don't always get the best result as far as the best project. For developers, it just means a longer wait, being in a queue, waiting for your hearing date. I think it's always better when you can just arrive at a resolution on the ground and get moving. And that's what I work on, with that exception, with the industry, with community. I call it the admittedly imperfect but perfectly workable resolution. Let's just get there. And usually when you work together, you make it a better project. It's a win-win. And then, life is better for everyone. There are things that we need to go negotiate on the ground. Like, for example, we don't need to always be debating the height and density, but maybe let's make sure that we've got better public realm at the end of it, a better setback on the sidewalk, more fine grain retail rather than just one big bank that takes up the whole block. Most developers want to arrive there too. So let's get there together. I had an eye-opening experience years ago. When I was first elected, I had a model of a city councillor who was my predecessor, named Michael Walker. He was there before me in Midtown Toronto, and he would always go into every meeting about any development, and he'd rail against it, and he'd beat his chest, and he'd say, "I'm going to stop it, and it's going to ruin the neighborhood. It's going to be the worst thing ever, and I'm going to stop it." And then he'd get a thunderous applause, and he'd get reelected by a landslide. And I just thought, as a young new councillor, that looks like it works. Like that's what you should do. As I recognized the seriousness of the housing affordability crisis, and I recognized this is not a game. This is Like, if we don't have a healthy supply of housing, affordable housing, if we don't rethink how we're doing things, no one's going to be able to afford a home. I changed my outlook on the housing debate entirely. I had another experience years ago when the Raptors were in the playoffs with the Cavs, Cleveland. I met this council member in Cleveland named Matt Zone, and he and I did a friendly bet. Whichever team lost, the losing councillor would drive to the other city and literally clean up the other's ward. Raptors lost. I hopped in my car, drove to Cleveland, picked up a broom, met up with his team, and I literally went up. I even went up and swept his front porch. We had a lot of fun together. And I remember meeting with members of his community in Cleveland, and there was a development happening in one of the neighborhoods there. And I said to his team, "Wow, this must be really controversial. I bet everybody's just, telling you to stop it, and you're probably beating your chest as well and trying to do whatever you can to get in the way of this development." And they looked at me really puzzled, and they said, "Why would we do that? No, this development is actually a sign that people want to invest in Cleveland. Um, this is a good thing. We're excited that somebody wants to develop one of the many vapid surface parking lots that we have remaining in Cleveland. We want to get going on these things." And I realized this isn't going to last forever in Toronto. We're fortunate to have a vibrant industry. We're fortunate that people want to live in this city. We're fortunate that people want to invest in this city. Now, we have to plan it well. It can't just be development for development's sakes. We need vibrant main streets. We need infrastructure, parks, services. It all needs to work together. We need a great quality of life. But we shouldn't just, fight development just to look like a hero to the community, because that's dishonest. And what I've learned is that by taking, I think, a more honest and thoughtful approach, it hasn't harmed me politically at all. My community is with me. Of course, there's always going to be some people who say, "I don't want any change at all." But my view is change is going to happen. Let's manage change. Let's manage it well. And the real question is, rather than development versus no development, the question is, have they left us better than they found us? And if the answer is yes, then we should approve it.
There's a great new book in the United States written by some left-wing progressives. You may have heard of it, called Abundance. And it argues, and it's from an American perspective, but it argues that progressives have become really good at regulation and stopping things, but really bad at actually building things. And that actually has been damaging to the hopes and dreams of a lot of the people that the progressive people are trying to help. And it actually went through things like home ownership for young people, but also homelessness. And it was fascinating. It found that homelessness wasn't where you had the worst social programs and mental health and income disparity and things like that you would have thought were correlated with homelessness weren't. The biggest correlation of homelessness was restrictive housing policies. So that when you didn't build a lot of housing and you didn't have housing opportunities, you had homelessness. So San Francisco, which is thought of as a very progressive city, has huge homelessness. Dallas, Houston, which are far more lenient in regards to building housing, have had increases in supply, doesn't have nearly the same amount of homelessness. And so their argument is progressives have got to start building again, not just regulating against everything. What do you think of that?
I see myself as a pragmatic progressive person. And I don't think that this debate should kind of be along the lines of whether you are progressive or conservative, but we all need to be self-aware. I find that, people who are so ideological often cannot see facts in front of them that disabuse themselves of what they already believe. And the reality is, if we are to be self-aware, there were a heck of a lot of young people who were voting conservative in the last in the recent federal election. Carney won, but that should send a message that young people who can't afford this country have not been satisfied with the status quo. So that should, progressives who are honest with ourselves should go, okay, what does that message mean? What do we need to learn from that? And I think the message is, like I said at the get-go, the way that things have always been done hasn't worked for too many people. We need to change our ways. And again, I think, where there are regulations and rules with respect to health, safety, when things make sense, you want rules around housing, for example, to make sure that they're engineered in a way that they don't fall over. Like of course, there are rules that make sense, and those should be enforced, and they should be realized. But things that don't make sense, that have just been there because they've just been there, let's clean it up, let's change it, and let's allow for real progress to be made. I moved a motion recently. It's analogous regarding our parks. We have bylaws in Toronto that restrict kids from climbing trees. You're not allowed to have a picnic or in certain areas and over a certain number of people. You legally actually have to ask for a permit if you want to play frisbee or throw a ball and play catch. Like crazy
A permit
stuff.
to throw a frisbee? You got to be
Yeah,
kidding.
that's
Seriously?
actually the bylaw in Toronto. Like just bizarre, absurd stuff. And then there's like some silly stuff, like you're not allowed to launch or land a hot air balloon in a park, like just weird stuff. So I moved a motion recently to not only clean up the absurd, archaic, unnecessarily restrictive rules in our parks, but allow for more things that cities around the world are already doing successfully, including where the size allows for like more food and beverage options and more creativity in our parks. Where you can sit at a patio, people watch, have a glass of wine or a coffee. Um, I just think rules should be there to protect people, but they shouldn't get in the way of responsible people living their lives.
We were just chatting about young people and young males with Frank Graves, who's one of Canada's biggest pollsters. And he says that the demographic that increased the most in voting for the Conservatives were young men, 18
Yeah,
to 35.
yeah.
And, you talk about home ownership. Why do you think young men are so dissatisfied, so disillusioned, and are so dramatically increasing their vote for Conservatives and Pierre Poilievre and populists rather than where they would have been historically, which is progressives?
It depends on the young man that you speak with, but I think in general, it runs the gamut of a number of issues. Certainly, affordability has been a big part of it. Um, Feeling vulnerable with respect to just being able to make a living, keeping your job. For some, it's been the culture war stuff. There's a lot of different reasons why I think a lot of young men have been dissatisfied, if not angry, with the status quo, and they're looking for other options. And that's why I think that for liberals, for more progressive people to be successful in politics, they can't be self-righteous. They can't be holier than thou. They can't pretend that they've always been perfect and done everything right. It's like any relationship. When you know that you can do better, when you know that you haven't done a good enough job, own it. Sometimes say you screwed up. You build trust that way, and then do better. So I think Prime Minister Carney is off to a good start, where he's reflecting that there's a yearning for change. He offered a different change than the Poilievre change, but now proof will be in the pudding, obviously, about will that change really address those young men and others concerns who have said, like, this world is not working for us. Our parents got an education, were able to buy a home, be able to retire successfully. We don't know if that's in the cards for us. And our government needs to be able to demonstrate that there's a real plan to give younger people a better life.
We got to take a break for some messages, and we're going to come back in 2 minutes with Toronto City Councillor Josh Matlow. I'm going to give him a firing line of a couple of different questions on a couple of different burning issues in Toronto. See how we perform. Stay with us, everyone. Josh Matlow on the firing line in 2 minutes. Stay with us. Back in 2. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. Real pleasure to be chatting with Josh Matlow, Toronto City Councillor. Ran for mayor. Some people think I think he's going to be someone we're hearing from in politics in the Toronto area, if not farther afield, for quite a while. He very articulate, very passionate individual. But let me put you on the
Thank you.
fire line, sir, and see what you
Yeah,
got to
yeah.
say. When's the Eglinton Crosstown going to finally open?
So they say by September of this year, but given its Metrolinks, take that with a grain of salt.
What went wrong? Why is it taking so long? What, like, we just can't trust government to build stuff?
Because Metrolinx, I think, had a screwed up contract with their contractors, the consortium Crosslinks, where they were successfully sued by their own contractors over and over again. Constant disputes over whose responsibility it was to pay for things, and ultimately, couldn't conceive of the fact that there might be some underground water at Yonge and Eglinton. There were lots of problems, but sources are telling me, and reliable ones, that it's going to be up and running this September. And I hope so, because the impact on the communities, the impact on the small businesses along Eglinton have been horrible. And everyone's waiting for it to finally get up and running. I would submit that any new transit project or major infrastructure project need to take communities and businesses and put them as part of their plan rather than leave them as collateral damage. And this was just managed horribly, and there's just no other way to put it. It was an abysmal failure, but of course, I'm hoping for at least some remedy to that in September if it opens.
Tell me what you think about this Ontario line. Is it going to be as abysmal a failure and managed as poorly as the Eglinton Crosstown? City council never had something like the Ontario line on its plans, and then all of a sudden it
Yeah.
shows up by Premier Doug Ford and Metrolinx as their big strategy. Is it a good infrastructure plan, or what do you think of it?
So it's not entirely true that the Ontario line was never really part of the city's plan. It was just a little different, and it was called the Downtown Relief Line historically. And Doug Ford came forward with a different type of light rail technology and metro technology, I believe, and a slightly different route with different stations. It's great that it's being built. We need that. Toronto needs different options for people to get around if we're going to combat congestion and get people on transit, like cities like Paris, New York, London, and most of the world already enjoy. We also need different lines to get around on when one line is delayed or is shut down. That happens in Toronto. So I'm excited that it's being built. But the best way that the government of Ontario, along with Metrolinx, will be able to demonstrate that they've learned from the Eglinton fiasco is if they support our request for a public inquiry into what went wrong on Eglinton. Again, I look at government the same way as I look at relationships with individuals. How do you trust that somebody has learned a lesson if they're not willing to be transparent about what went wrong and demonstrate that they've learned from it? That's what I want the government of Ontario and Metrolinx to do. So show us that you've learned, show us how you've learned, show us how you're doing things differently. Then I'll feel confident that the Ontario line will be more successful.
I want to ask you about the Ontario Science Centre and about this big spa
Yeah.
at Ontario Place. When was it? A year ago? Big controversy, big opposition when those changes were announced. Seems to have quieted down. Should we still be upset about it, or just give in and allow Ford to do what he wants to do?
Of course, we should be upset. And listen, the media focuses on different things at different times. Right now, we're all justifiably upset about Donald Trump, but it doesn't mean that the problem's gone away. Where Doug Ford, without speaking to anybody in the community, has shut down the Science Center in the heart of Flemington Park, where a lower income, primarily racialized community has lost out on jobs, learning opportunities for their kids, and a whole northern part of our city and region that doesn't have access to a cultural institution that has been beloved. At Ontario Place, not only is Doug Ford spending millions and millions of our tax dollars on a parking lot for a private spa, he got hoodwinked by Therma. A New York Times investigation showed that Therma, this
Wasn't it who
Austrian
they
spa,
said they were?
they pretended to be a different Therma spa company. Like, Doug Ford talks about being some big deal maker. The guy got absolutely his rug just pulled from under him by this company pretending to be a different company. There is no evidence that they actually have the money to even build this spa now. And the one thing that's worse than replacing public waterfront with a massive private spa is if nothing happens there for years to come. So no longer do we have the Ontario Place we used to love. We won't have even a spa. We'll just have this like derelict construction zone for years because they screwed up. Uh, this 95-year deal that they made clearly is a bad one. But I mean, this is a guy who also like screwed up a corrupt deal on the Greenbelt and couldn't even build blue license plates. So I'm not surprised.
I'm embarrassed by those license plates. You travel around this world. No other province or state has got license plates that disintegrate as quickly as ours do. It's just amazing. Tell me about the I don't even know what you call it today, the East Don lands. We've seen millions of dollars spent on building a new river, some beautiful new white bridges, lots of
Yeah.
infrastructure that's being built, both at the bottom of the Don Valley Parkway, both on the east and on the west. Are you excited about that? What's going to happen, or given the lack of development? Is it just going to be vacant land?
Well, yes and yeah. I mean, yes and hopefully no. Meaning, I'm very excited about it. This regeneration has been years in the making. I'm glad to see it actually happening. So many things we talk about in Toronto and in Canada are things that either don't happen for many years or are talked about and never happen. Um, Such as high-speed rail between Windsor and Quebec. I hope that actually happens. So I'm excited to see um, the regeneration of these lands. I'm excited to see the bridges arrive. I'm excited to see Villiers Island start to actually become an island. And I'm excited to see a real plan to mitigate and hopefully prevent flooding in parts of our city. That being said, though, like you and I discussed before, we need the market to realistically rebound to then pay for this all and have a community sprout up on the island. Now, listen, I'm hopeful that the market will get better in the next 2 or 3 years. Um, I'm hopeful that we are in a period of time that we need to just get through rather than it being the long-term reality. But to say it simply, I am excited about that project.
Tell us about Downsview. We got this big Air Force base that's now being turned into, a big park in a big city. Is it being planned right? Is it being developed right?
I think we're making some progress on it. These have been, primarily federal lands. The city has been approving kind of a new neighborhood there as well with Northgate, and I like the plans. I think it's a really lovely plan that merits support. It's too bad that it's been done over the years in such an ad hoc way. It would have been nice to see like a real clear visionary plan for the whole site from the get-go. I would like to see, for example, more even more of an effort to create a community that people can age in place in. There are ingredients that I'd like to see in the pot still, but but again, I'm glad that things are starting to move, and I'm very hopeful the Downsview will become eventually the kind of neighborhood that we want and the central park that we want in that region of the city.
You ran against a more right-wing individual during the mayoralty campaign, and then I think you actually campaigned against him when he ran in a council by-election as well, who was focused on safe injection sites that he thought were
Yeah.
wrong. That brought a lot of crime. That crime was going up, and that was an issue that city council wasn't paying enough attention to. Homelessness, tent cities, things like that. What do you say to people that are worried about those issues?
I think the worry is real. You're alluding to Anthony Fury. His solutions were not. Meaning he had no solutions. He would just rail. He would just say, "Oh, crime's out of control. It's all awful. Oh my gosh, stop all the people on drugs. Everything's awful." But he had no solutions. You can't just make problems disappear. Um, I mean, again, bringing government down to individuals again. in our own lives, you can't just wish problems away. You've got to deal with them, and you got to deal with them well, and you've got to deal with them honestly. So there are people who are struggling with opioids. It is a crisis throughout North America and around the world. And we can't just pretend that that's not happening. We also have a homelessness crisis in Toronto, across Canada, and around the world. You can't just clear them away and pretend that they're just going to disappear. These are people, and if you take them out of one park, they go to a different park or a laneway or somewhere else. We need to actually address the problem, meaning we need to have shelter support that it has the capacity, along with the environments and shelters where people will choose to be in them rather than in our parks or our subways, where they feel safe and they have support. You need adequate addiction treatment and mental health care to provide to certain individuals. You need transitional and supportive housing. You need affordable housing, and you need ultimately the housing supply that eventually people can actually find a home once they're ready to be in a home. The best way to fix these problems is to give people a roof over their head. Frankly, I know people who are middle class and upper middle class who have addiction problems or mental health challenges, but because they're well housed and they have financial means, they're either able to function or cover up better than somebody on our streets. So there's a lot of things that I think governments over decades have failed us on with respect to housing, and of course, mental health and addiction support. But all that has to be there. And so any candidate who just goes, all those homeless people are the problem or people on drugs are the problem, they're not the problem. They're, in fact, a symptom of the problem. They're victims of the problem. And we need to support those individuals because those people are somebody's dad, somebody's brother, somebody's mom, somebody's kid. These are people that we want to be functional, healthy, contributing members of our society.
Because of what's happening in the Middle East, we've had numerous protests, some that have become inappropriate. Maybe not as bad as what we've seen elsewhere in North America, but protests and issues that make people feel really of two minds. One, that there's anti-Semitism, and one that there's Islamophobia. What do you think about what's going on, and what's the role of the city council and the city government and the mayor in trying to bring us together as a community?
There certainly is growing anti-Semitism and Islamophobia, and what our communities expect of every government, every elected representative, is to rally around them when they are feeling victimized, when they're feeling vulnerable. Certainly, many members of the Jewish community don't feel that any government has taken them seriously, stood by them as they were re-traumatized after October 7th a couple of years ago. This is a community that is two generations from the Holocaust, spent 2,000 years going from country to country, persecuted, experiencing pogroms, and that's part of the culture where there is this understandable concern that where there are warning signs that the community is vulnerable again, the worst could happen again. So they need their mayor, their council, their premier, and their prime minister to tell them that they have their back. And I just think that every government can do better on that. When it comes to protests on the streets, I believe that we have a charter that protects our collective right and individual right of freedom of peaceful expression and peaceful assembly. But when it's not peaceful or when it's hateful, that's a different story. And we need to, I think, better address how to protect people's right to, again, peacefully express themselves, make their voice heard, protest foreign governments. All of this should be able to happen. In fact, we should fight to protect that right. But when it crosses the line toward intimidation, harassment, or violence and hate, then we need to draw a very clear line in the sand. And I don't think that we've figured that out quite yet.
We're going to take a final break and come back in 2 minutes with Josh Matlow, City Councillor in the City of Toronto. And we're going to ask him, what's the future for Josh Matlow and for the City of Toronto? Stay with us, everyone. Back with some final quick concluding comments in 2 minutes. Welcome back, everyone. We've had a really interesting chat with Toronto City Councillor Josh Matlow today, talking about some of the issues in Toronto. We've talked about housing, we've talked about homelessness, we've talked about income disparity, we've talked about young men, we've talked about Metrolinx. He's promising us that Eglinton Crosstown is going to.
Oh, don't you dare! No way.
You promised us.
I would never promise anything on behalf of Metrolinx. No way.
Let me ask you. I think some people think very highly of you. What's the future for Josh Matlow?
It's so kind of you to say. My honest answer is I don't know. The most important part of my future is that I have a family that I love dearly, and I have become more reflective and more present over the years about just how important they are. And no matter what I do career-wise, they're my future. When it comes to my career, I want to continue waking up every day knowing that my purpose is genuinely purposeful, that I'm, as my mom used to teach me, leave the place better than you found it.
Okay.
I mean,
So what's your vision for Toronto? Where do you see us in 2 years?
My vision for Toronto is a city that is more affordable, that has a great quality of life, that is a city that doesn't envy other big cities around the world, but actually just does it, and maybe even has other people around the world look to Toronto and go, look what they're doing there. Let's be inspired by Toronto. I want a city that attracts companies, attracts investment, attracts jobs. I want a city that has more playful and creative parks. I want to have vibrant main streets. I want a city that says yes to creative, fun, innovative ideas. I want a city that, again, you don't have to travel the whole world to find what you're looking for. You can find it right here. And that also means celebrating the cultural diversity that we have and doing even more with it. I love the food, the music, the festivals. I just see the city as full of potential, but it's unmet. And I want us to be the city we are meant to be.
Are there one or two projects that you love or you dream of or that you want to create that really excite you?
I want to see one or two projects. I honestly couldn't restrict myself to one or two projects. I work on so many different issues all at the same time, and frankly, I just want to everything from improving our parks, our main streets, tackling the affordability crisis, and ultimately just creating an environment in Toronto where we don't spend as much time on the things that don't matter, and we put more focus on fixing our infrastructure, improving our services, making our city work. That's what I'm working on, and that runs the gamut of almost every issue and subject you can imagine in the city.
Josh Matlow, it's been a real pleasure chatting with you tonight. Thank you so much. I think
my delight.
People take a look at the individuals on city council and wonder who's going to be playing a significant role, a leadership role in our city in the future. And I think a lot of people are looking at you. So we're expecting a lot from you. Okay.
Brian, thank you. Thanks for the encouragement.
That's our show for tonight, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I'm on. I remind you every Monday through Friday at 6 o'clock on 960 AM. You can stream me online at www.saga960am.ca. All my videos and podcasts go up on YouTube and social media and podcast servers as soon as the radio show goes to air. I got to tell you, there are a few politicians that you're going to be hearing of in the future, and Josh Matlow is one of those. So let's pay attention to this gentleman. He's going to be a player in our city and in our province and in our country in the future. Thanks, everybody. Good night.